So, welcome to the second live talk of the course. Glad to be here. Just gonna take a moment to be still, be in the present moment. Take a few conscious breaths. My dog Zen. Say hi again. Go here. So, today I want to talk about the ups and downs of being yourself. What does it mean to be yourself? And what is preventing you from being yourself? Well, this also includes who are you to be in the first place? Right? Because in order to be yourself, you have to know yourself. And there are many levels to knowing yourself. So we're going to talk about that today. To start, we'll start on the surface level. Surface level is, for example, me right now is my human body and my story of everything that's happened in my past, from the second I was born to this moment here. That is my story self. You know, I have a name. My name's Ryan. I was born into a family, and I have sisters and all of that stuff. And it's beautiful. It's to be honored. When I was growing up, I noticed early on, as a child, how a lot of, like, especially in like middle school and high school, it seems like kids are start to develop this sense of self in a way where they start to experience insecurity. And insecurity is really, it's fear, and it's fear of judgment, and it really limits us from really being comfortable just being ourselves, whatever that means to us. And it's something that's like it definitely happens, but we don't talk about it quite often. And I think it's something really important to talk about because there's a lot of psychological negative effects to the fact of being in fear of being ourselves. And this can go into such a range, not just like from how you dress to how you speak to who you talk to what kind of car you drive, to what kind of clothes you wear. I mean, the list can go on and on and on about how fear of being who we really want to be, whatever that may look like, stops us and it molds us into these sort of fake individuals or roles that we play and that we absorb and that we take on because what part of what we're fearing is that we're not going to be understood or we're going to be misjudged. Um, and these are all really important things for us to slow down and look at, even if, probably most people here are past childhood. So, even now, you may have, at this point in your life, realized this game and kind of tried to separate yourself from it, right? This fear of judgment and just really being comfortable in your own skin. But as I'm sure you know, it's a journey because it's not just one simple thing. It goes into so many aspects of our lives. And, part of the reason I'm bringing this up with enlightenment is because enlightenment is one, it is one, but it has so much to do with transcending fear, with finding safety and comfort, and with knowing truth. And what's really interesting is that the more we start to catch where we've experienced fear of judgment, and we start to catch these these obstacles that prevent us from just being comfortable by ourselves, with ourselves, the closer we get to who we really are. Because who we really are is far beyond any fear. I think a lot of people might say, "Oh, I don't have fear of being myself. I'm totally comfortable being myself." But then at the same time, they don't realize that half the actions they take in their life are surrounded by how other people are going to interpret them, whether it's spiritually or in work environments or around friends or family members. It's a very sneaky pattern. It is not easy to catch and to let go of, but you have to catch it in order to let go of it. One way to help discern where you're playing these games of self deception and not really being who you really want to be is first pay attention to how you are acting and what you're into when you're alone, when no one's watching. When nobody's watching us, we feel a bit of a freedom to really just be what we want to be, sing in the shower, or or just be silly, or I don't know, whatever it is. But that is a good example because if we can feel that comfortable with ourselves, now there are people that aren't even comfortable, kind of letting loose even by themselves because the fear of that catching on into their other daily life is so deeply embedded, conditioned that they have a hard time even relaxing and being themselves around themselves. If that's the case for you, then okay. Maybe start to observe in yourself where where's this whole game coming from, right? Where's this whole idea that you need to be anyone? Where is it coming from? It's coming from feelings within us, and it's coming from thought patterns in our head. So in order to transcend any of that, we have to bring awareness to it first. So listen to yourself. Listen to yourself right now. Listen to yourself when you're interacting on Facebook. I mean, the idea of self-image can happen anywhere, even especially on social media. Right? I'm gonna post a cute selfie of myself with a quote, a wisdom quote above it. Uh, Look at that. Why? What is in there? What is the real motivation behind this? You know, um, are you trying to cultivate some image of yourself? I think a lot of people fall into this idea or trap of trying to look successful. They want to appear successful, whatever that means for you. For some, it may mean, nice car, fancy money, materialism. For others, it may be, I don't know, lots of friends or vacation stuff or hiking in the mountains. Um, and not that any of that is wrong, but you just have to really be with yourself and listen to, like, am I sharing this because I feel this genuine excitement to just share, or is there some part of me that's trying to build my sense of self up, that's trying to give me more validity or value to how I feel about myself? That's where you have to pay attention. Now on the flip side, I've caught in myself this hesitation, like I don't want to put a selfie up because it seems vain. But that could be a fear. That could be my own thing of not wanting to just do something if it naturally wants to happen because of my own judgment and my own conditioning. So again, I have to pay attention too. It's not like one size fits all and there's only one answer. The answer always depends relatively to where we're at and what we need to be challenged by to push our comfort zones a bit. So for those like a lot of spirit, let's say spiritually more enlightened individuals, tend to see somebody with like lots of selfies on their profile and go, "Oh goodness, the me." But and we got to catch that. Okay, that's a judgment. We're judging them. We're not allowing them to be themselves, and that's actually a really important part to getting more comfortable being ourselves. We have to practice letting other people be themselves, whatever that means for them. If that means like, showing off all their cars and their clothes and being in that whole material game, then let them be in that. Don't judge them for that. Love them regardless. Just like appreciate that's what they're into, that's what they like. Okay, cool. I love you regardless. And the more you start to practice loving everyone for who they are in that moment, the more naturally you'll be able to start loving yourself for whoever you want to be and get rid of all this excess thought and fear and worry about how other people are going to perceive you or family and friends or random strangers. I mean, something else I find really interesting that I've caught myself doing, especially early on in my past, is like how much energy do we put in to impressing random people that we're like never going to even see again in our lives. You know, like you get all dressed up fancy to go to the grocery store or to go to the mall or whatever. And I'm not saying this is wrong, but I'm just saying like inquire about it. Like why? Why do we need to maintain this image of clean cut and all nice and fancy when we're at home we prefer to be in our pajamas. Maybe I'll start a pajama movement, as actually I'm in my pajamas right now. And but this doesn't mean that just because somebody's really like into their looks and clothing and stuff, it doesn't mean that they're wrong. That's okay too. But we have to look at ourselves and we have to decide how much of our actions are really about us being comfortable, really deeply comfortable with ourselves, versus doing it for someone else. And this can apply just as much spiritually, trying to make sure we comment in a spiritual manner. We're trying to make sure we only post spiritual things because what? We're protecting a spiritual image, which is still an image. Another way to figure out, to kind of catch yourself um, straying away from being yourself, is noticing roles. Again, when I was like a teenager, I realized, I don't know how or when or why, but I just sort of realized that I acted very differently around different people. I had a group of friends in high school that were kind of like the rough crowd, and I'd have my rough crowd personality, hanging out with them, right? And then I'd like go into a class, and then I would act completely different around the teacher, and then I'd go into the ROTC, like this army type of thing, and again, totally different character. And then I'd go to my mom's or my parents, my house, and I'd be acting different there. And I like suddenly realized, like, why am I putting on all these different masks? Like just playing all these different roles and characters. Or like when I got a little bit older and started going to work, right? If I was a manager at the time. Oh, gotta put my manager mask on. And then you get off. You all gotta put that one down. And now I'm gonna put on the chill party, the party guy mask. And so like that's something really important too to notice, to just catch in yourself. If do you act differently around different people, and why? If you're really comfortable, if you really know yourself and you're really comfortable being yourself, then that that I don't know, style, personality, whatever you want to call it, is continuous always, no matter who you're around. You don't adapt to them. You adapt to yourself, but you don't adapt to anything else in the outside environment, nor on the internal environment. And this is so much about knowing, figuring out who you are, who you want to be, and really just being that. And if someone judges you, that's their path. That's their karma. And unfortunately, anyone that judges you for being yourself, we already automatically know are not comfortable being themselves. So we could have compassion. When we're comfortable being in our skin, whether that means dancing at the concert when no one else is dancing, or or I don't know, wearing whatever we want to wear to go to the grocery store, or listening to whatever music we want to listen to. The more we push these boundaries and like challenge these fears of being judged or being misperceived, and really just embrace being whatever whoever we really want to be deep down inside, not only is that good for us, but it's actually good for everyone else around us, because you become an inspiration, a light. Even if they're judging you, some part in the back of their head is like, damn, I wish I was that brave. I wish I was that confident. And that's a beautiful thing. The fact that when we really honor who we want to be and just embrace living our life, you really do inspire those around you. And they may not have to tell you, nor do you need the credit. But just the point is, it's like the more we start to dive into who we are, into our truth, into our practices, and this doesn't just apply to being ourselves. This applies to just being peaceful, to being a master of our emotions and of our thoughts. Just being a light in the world in any way is really a powerful teaching. You don't have to be like an actual teacher making videos or doing seminars or this or that to be a really powerful teacher in the world. You just have to really keep going in within yourself and developing and mastering your practice. And you are a teacher. And actually, I'm sure everybody listening here is already a teacher in that manner. Or the word enlightenment probably would have scared you off. So, and that actually, your spiritual practice also does fall, it is very closely linked to who you really are. And it's also the master tool to help you get rid of the fears that are preventing you from being. So, on the surface level of like our personalities, our stories, our likes, dislikes, our opinions, our looks, my haircut or lack thereof, the clothes I wear, all that stuff is surface self. And you can know yourself to a degree on the surface, but to really get to the depths of comfort and of freedom, you want to go deeper than just the surface, than just the human body and the human experience. Because the real truth, the deeper truth, is that you are much more than this human experience and this human body. And I think a lot of people are like, yeah, I know that. Yeah, I mean, yeah. What's the quote thing? Popular one. It's not coming to me. There's like a bumper sticker that you see a lot. Now it's evading me. Something like we're not our bodies. We're more than just our bodies. Something like that. And yes, conceptually, I think a lot of us understand that. But then there's another experiential level to knowing, without a shadow of a doubt, knowing that we're much more in this form and experience, where the real gifts of enlightenment are too. Because when you really know who you are, there is no fear. Fear is a trivial concept to an infinite being. Like death. Death is not a negative. It's not scary. How could it be? When you understand that you are this timeless being that is experiencing a human form, but is not its existence, your true existence is not dependent on this human form. Otherwise, we'd be screwed, right? But most people really fear death because fundamentally they have this belief that their existence is dependent on this form. So they do everything in their feasible power to make sure that their form, their body, doesn't die, doesn't get hurt, doesn't get sick, doesn't doesn't get killed in a car accident or some crazy person. We're all constantly in this fight or flight survival mode when we don't understand who we really are. And that has a tremendous amount of side effects, not only for our internal experience, our psychological experience, but also for how we interact with the outside world. If you're in a constant state of fear and self preservation, then you're not going to be the most compassionate, gentle, loving, and forgiving individual because that fight or flight survival instincts are going to take over, and you're going to justify it somewhere inside with like whatever it is that you're doing that's negative will be justified. And if you think about it, like so much of the suffering in our world right now, the craziness, the chaos, the individuals that are doing the bits and craziness and chaos in their heads, they think they're the sane ones. They really believe they're the ones that are sane. And you have to look at that in a sense of like, well, am I doing that a little bit? Not to their degree, obviously. I highly doubt anyone here is in tremendously deep levels of unconsciousness. You're definitely all conscious. But still, we can look at that pattern and say that self deception and say, hold on, where am I deceiving myself? If that can happen so seamlessly and so quickly for anyone, am I doing it? And just be like real humble about that. Really like look at it. Look at yourself in that manner. Like, oh, dang, I think that might speak to me a bit. Oh, also, and hello everyone. I've been seeing some highs and hellos and hearts. Lovely, lovely. Thank you for being here. If you guys have your coffees or your teas, cheers. Another really good thing. I had a friend who's here, and he mentioned, he's like, Ryan, I want to awaken. I want to become enlightened, but I don't necessarily want to turn into a hippie. I don't want to grow my beard and hair out like you do. And I'm glad he said it because it's a really important thing for us to acknowledge is that we have these images, we have these ideas of what we're supposed to look like in some future event. But being enlightened means being conscious. Being conscious means having choice. So you can't go into awakening and real awakening and enlightenment and suddenly lose your power of choice. And you also, you certainly do not follow patterns. A conscious enlightened individual writes their own patterns. That's the beauty, that's the freedom. We get to be our own creators. You may be inspired by a pattern, but you will consciously choose to follow that pattern if you so wish. But the point here is you have the free will to do the exact opposite. So, being enlightened, being spiritual, that can have an image of what we're supposed to look like, how we're supposed to act. And that's also a really important thing for us to acknowledge within ourselves. When do we play that game? When do we try to look spiritual? When do we try to maintain some image, again, a role of being a spiritual person? Because the deeper levels of being a spiritual person is about transcending fear and judgment, which means just relaxing. And actually, that does go into something else I wanted to speak about. Defining and redefining what does spirituality look like for you and for me. And for me, I know that's one important piece of the puzzle for me in spirituality is being real, being honest, being open, being real about where I still have faults in my practice. Because yes, I'm creating and helping share a path to enlightenment because I do have a certain level of mastery, but I still have slips. And I think part of honoring being myself It's also about just being 100% honest and open and natural, rather than trying to protect an image of me being enlightened at all times. You see that that's where it's so sneaky. You can get anybody. But it really comes down to trying to like constantly guess, how is somebody else going to interpret me, and how can I protect this image of me that I have in my head or in my social media or wherever. Got to catch that game and call it out, and then choose not to play it. Also, like for example, with the spirituality deal, we have a lot of. I think we mostly tend to have a lot of conditioned ideas of what spirituality looks like. So, for example, I love rock and roll music, Led Zeppelin, Jimi Hendrix, Pink Floyd, um, and to me, that music is spiritual. I feel it in my soul when I'm listening to The Dark Side of the Moon or Jimi Hendrix just playing his heart out. Like that to me is like one. It's like it's like what I guess like spiritual music. It's like church music or choir music or gospel music to me, because it gets me deep in my feelings and my soul. I love that type of music. Uh, and yet, I think there's a lot of conditioning of, oh, that's not spiritual, you know. But then we have to stop and say, why not? What is your definition of spiritual? Just because the words aren't specifically saying God or positive things, that doesn't make it spiritual. To me, when something can reach, and when art can hit me somewhere where I can feel it, feel the emotions, and I can feel power, and especially like back in those days with that music, so much music has like this mystical lyrics and these deep bits of wisdom hidden within the songs. If you let go of the judgmental mind and just really listen to the song, you'll hear all kinds of powerful wisdom and beauty, and that to me is God. And you don't need to talk and say the words like God or Om or Shiva to see it everywhere. And so, like, just a small example, like of, or another one, for example, I play video games, and you might say, oh, that's not spiritual, playing war games on Xbox. But that's just it. Like, you gotta catch where that mind says, oh, that's not spiritual. Because really, so much of spirituality is not what you do, it's how you do it. When I listen to rock and roll music, I feel it, I dance, I just love it. I just feel so good, and I'm enjoying myself, and that to me is a spiritual experience when I'm playing video games. Yeah, I'm a bit competitive and I like to have fun, but I used to be really like negative and aggressive, but then I brought my spiritual practice into it, and I realized like you can even be a light, you can be a positive individual anywhere you go. For me, it's even in video games. When I have a headset on, and I'm playing video games, and someone gets me, it's like, I could. A lot of people will cuss them out and talk a bunch of trash, right? That's feeding the problems. But you can also say, "Oh man, nice shot," and just like change that pattern, change that negativity into positivity. And suddenly, something like playing video games, it isn't this is just a negative thing. It can be a positive thing, if you bring your positive energy into it. And it all makes for good spiritual practice too, because like let's again say playing video games, uh, when we lose, we tend to get reactive in some way, negative in some way. And that can be a really powerful spiritual practice. Anytime you become reactive, you've lost, you forgot who you are, which is in the positive. And so it can be a valuable lesson for you. Like, why am I so attached to winning? Or why am I so attached to this moment being different than the way it is? And whatever that is for you. So, part of my point here is like when you're honoring who you want to be, it's also honoring what you want to do within reason. I mean, there are some things, there are activities in the world that are not appropriate, right? But there are a lot of them that are, and you have to discern what is what. You have to know yourself. You have to listen to your truth. Now, one thing that's really, a valuable way to help discern that is the golden rule, which is do unto others as you'd have them do unto you. That's a really valuable way to kind of sift through all of our activities and make sure that none of them are in a very unconscious or unhealthy manner. Just to make sure, like, is this really fair? Is this really compassionate? Um, is it healthy enough? Is it healthy in its own right? The other issue that we run into when we're trying to be spiritual and trying to make sure we do everything in a spiritual manner is that we repress things that we want. That's another tricky obstacle. And you say, "Oh, I'm going to be a person of God," and some part of you, I don't know, wants to be a what's something that people would judge as being not spiritual. I don't know. I want to have a mohawk. Fine, whatever. I want to have a mohawk and tattoos. Right? Cool. Now I'm all about that. Be yourself. That to me is spiritual. Being yourself, being comfortable. Just be your own art. But for a lot of people, there might be a hesitation because they're like, "Ooh, I don't know. Like, if I'm in church or whatever spiritual place, people are going to judge me and think I'm evil or I'm crazy, or this or that." And that's where you have to acknowledge the fear, and you have to use your own discernment to really be honest and decide, like, is it really a negative thing, or is this just this whole game of conditioning that's come from religion and it's come from society and media? Challenge those things and be yourself, you know whatever that it feels like. And what you'll also learn is that the more you honor being who you think you are, you're getting rid of that freedom. You're willing to challenge the conditionings of the world. But there are deeper levels, like I mentioned earlier, about getting past the surface. What we can fall into is doing things to strengthen our sense of self. For example, let's say you want a tattoo of something. Let's say it's like a guy wants a tattoo of, like, I don't know, something that they would think is cool. And you gotta look at that. You gotta stop for a second and say, why? What about, why do I want this? And sometimes, oftentimes, it's not. It's yeah, we like it, we think it's cool, but what parts and deep part of us really wants is like, ooh, I can't wait to show it off. I can't wait to walk around and to look cool and to look like a badass or whatever. And that's something to pay attention to as well. And it doesn't have to be like that too. It could be anything. It could be new shoes you got, or dress, or makeup. Makeup is a big one, and or haircut. But the point is you really got to listen and pay attention to every action that we take, especially when it has to do with image, and be real about, am I trying to increase my sense of self here? Because the tricky thing too about increasing your sense of self with something materialistic is that, one, it never ends, nor does it ever really satisfy. I think that's why sometimes people end up, their whole body's covered with tattoos and they're just not satisfied. They need more. They need more. And really that's because you can't satisfy to the depths, because you're investing in in uh, in the surface. If you really want to get to the the real satisfaction of who you are, being completely comfortable in your own skin at all times, then you've got to go deeper than the skin, deeper than the human body. Once you get into the deeper levels, then it all kind of happens naturally. Another piece to being yourself is listening to your mind. Listen to the voice in your head right now and at all times. Because this voice in our head is sort of the big culprit. If we really were going to call one out, it's the main source of all of our suffering and fear that prevents us from being ourselves. If we didn't have that voice, like think about like with animals, dogs, right? They don't have this game of like how do they look, how do their pictures, what angle should they take their picture from, or or all these silly little mind games. They're just like they're just comfortable being themselves, however that is, and and it's because they don't have this mind going on in the background saying, oh, you know, I need a haircut, or oh, man, I would feel so good if I had a new car or whatever. And so another way of going about being yourself is about quieting your mind. When you quiet your mind, you're naturally being yourself just naturally happens. And again, this doesn't mean you're going to grow your hair out and your beard and go live in a cave. It could be quite the opposite, and it probably will be for most people. It will be whatever, it'll be similar to what you're doing now, but just with a sense of ease and lightness, no more fear. I mean, no more fear is real freedom. Fear is not an enjoyable experience. So that's another way of looking at this. If you're like, okay, I want to be myself. This sounds like cool. I'm going to pay attention to what roles I'm playing, what games I'm playing. If you really want the shortcut, it's about listening to your mind. Listen to that voice in your head, because that voice is the very thing that keeps pulling you away from who you really are. I think conceptually, a lot of us we know, you hear the spiritual terms like you are love or you are truth, and we know this conceptually. But the more we know this experientially, again, the more we transcend fear, because love and fear don't coexist. So for this week, I recommend two practices. One, catching where your own fears of judgment and fears of self image sneak in, and they're not easy to catch. They're blind, the very nature of our egos are blind spots. There's there are these areas within us that for so long we have not been able to see. That's its very nature. That's how it maintains its existence, is by hiding in the shadows of our awareness, by staying in our blind spots. But if you make a practice to really be in the present moment and to be really alert to how you're feeling and what's going on in your head, you can catch these blind spots. And every time you do, that's a moment of awakening. That's a moment of enlightenment because you're lighting up something that was into some bit of darkness within you. It doesn't mean you catch one thing and everything just evaporates and you're suddenly, on Jesus level. It's a work. It's practice, practice, practice. You catch one thing at a time. That's it. You just honor one thing at a time, wherever you're at right now. Your practice, your level of comfort being yourself. Just honor that, and work with it. Work with this moment. So calling ourselves out when we fall into that game of self-image, of something beyond being comfortable in our own style. The second part, and this is a very important part too, is the other side of the equation, is to catch when you are judging somebody else at any point. Because in that moment, you're feeding that whole game of conditional love, that game that they themselves need to change in order to be accepted and appreciated. And this goes for, the ones who are least spiritual, right? Just, I don't know, all about themselves and all about materialism and things. And also it goes for the ones who are spiritual, maybe stuck in spiritual roles, or you're perceiving that they're stuck in spiritual roles, spiritual images, egos. For the whole spectrum, just let everybody be who they are, where they are. If they disregard all spirituality and say, "Oh, it's all nonsense," fine, beautiful. Let them be that in this moment. Honor that. Don't have any desire for them to be different, for their minds to be different, their opinions to be different. Just love them. There's a beautiful karma to this. The more we practice this unconditional love for where everyone's at, especially those who are operating in unconsciousness, obvious unconsciousness, when we can love them, we're given this gift of being able to love ourselves more seamlessly, more easily, which means being more comfortable being ourselves. And how do you see someone and love them unconditionally? Well, you first catch where your mind is judging them, where your mind is saying that they should be different, both in feeling and in thought. That's so important. And as these weeks go on, you're going to hear me saying so often that one of the fundamental pieces of enlightenment and awakening is simply catching the patterns, the unconscious patterns. You just have to, oh, here's a judgment. Oh, here's a image I'm playing. Oh, and you just that moment of moment of seeing it. Whoa, there it is. That is a moment of awakening. It's also because when you go, oh, there's no judgment of it. So you have to be careful. You don't judge yourself when you catch yourself in judgment. That's just more mind. That's just more judgment. You see, a lot of people get hung up on that. So let's say we're practicing non-judgment, and you're going throughout your day, and then who knows? I don't know what would happen that would trigger a judgment. Um, let's say on social media, someone says their opinion about to wear a mask or not to wear a mask, and then this whole debate happens in the thread, and you might catch yourself, or your mind, not yourself, you'll catch your mind, agreeing with some people and disagreeing with other people, and attaching your agreements and your disagreement feelings with those individuals. That is judgment. That is separation. So you got to catch that. Oh, okay, I'm doing it here. I'm doing this game of separation, this game of they're not supposed to think that way. They're not supposed to believe that thing. They're not supposed to have that opinion. They're not supposed to wear that hat or whatever. Catch it. And then what we tend to do, though, is we catch something like that, and then we go, oh, Ryan, come on. Oh, you suck at this practice. You suck at judgment or non-judgment. You suck at love. And so our minds then goes to this next level, and it judges the fact that we were judging. But that's just the mind again. That's the whole thing. That's the game. If you really want to step out of judgment, you have to step out of mind. So when you catch the mind, that's all you need to let the mind go, is catching it. If you can't let it go here, though, it's going to come back in, and it's going to come back in, and it's going to come back in every time you catch it. And the mind's going to come right back in, commenting on what you're observing, and then so it's reasserted itself. So it's like this little game that's like you catch it because that moment of catching is actually a moment of disidentifying from the mind, from the false self, and getting you closer to who you are. Then a split second later, the mind's like, oh no, they're not getting away from me that fast. I'm going to sneak back in and I'm going to comment on what you just observed. And he does, and it's successful for most time people. And so it pulls you back into thought, pulls you back into the story and into the judgment on a different level. And then whew, you're lost in your practice again. You're lost in judgment. You're lost in mind. You got to catch this. When you catch this, there's a tremendous amount of freedom. I'm going, oh, damn it. Okay, I see what he's talking about. I see the mind doing that game right now. Okay. And then just let go of the desire to talk anymore. Let go of the desire to comment at all. You don't need to comment. You don't need to tell yourself that you're not judging. You just be in the silence. The experience of enlightenment, awakening, is beyond words, literally. So if you're determined to take words into the experience, that very nanosecond that you take a word into trying to describe the experience, you can lose the experience. You know, one of the fundamental mechanisms of our minds, of our thoughts in our head, is that it's always commenting on how it wants things to be different. It wants somebody else to be different. It wants the weather to be different. It wants myself to be different. It wants my spiritual progress to be different. It wants my clothes to be different, or the house, or just constant stuff. But listen to that. Listen for it. Just like bring awareness to how the mind is just constantly in this like non-acceptance of what is. This constant desire for things to be different. And what's so ironic about it is even when we do create that very difference that the mind is offering, then we've already found three other things that we want to be different. So it never satisfies. We got to look at that paradox, that dilemma. Otherwise, we're just in a never ending spiral of complaining and non acceptance, resistance to this entire spectrum of the present moment. I like to think, I don't know about think is the right word, but I see the present moment as this blanket of a reality. Like it's like a screen, a giant screen in front of me at all times. And it's all interconnected. Not only with everything else in outside environment, but also intimately connected to something in me. And when you really rewire yourself to seeing everything as present as in this screen or blanket of present moment, and you honor present moment, how whatever form or image that it takes in front of you, man, that transforms your life. Like, I mean, it is so powerful because when somebody comes into your present moment and they challenge you, you don't just see this random person coming at you. You see the present moment. This is, oh, hello, present moment in the form of challenging person. Hello. You honor that. You love that. And then they remove themselves because you learned your lesson. And then something else comes in. It's like, oh, okay, hello, present moment. It's a constant hello, present moment. Of course, you don't really have to say that, in words, but that is the experience. And then so there's this trust because why? Why do you trust everything? Because everything is present moment. Everything is life. Everything is universe. A powerful epiphany I had early on in this awakening. Growing up, I had a belief that a God existed, or I really wanted some kind of divine, intelligent being to exist. But I didn't really have any like direct experience with it. I would pray, and I wouldn't get any answers. Any voice wouldn't speak back. It would just be silence. Which before I used to think was meaning a lack of God, but now I see silence in a totally different way. But then it finally dawned on me that like this divine being, it's never been in some other place, in some other dimension, or some other, above the clouds, or in cosmic space, because it is this moment, the divine God, or whatever word you like, that power of creation and intelligence. Oh man, intelligence be like intelligence so vast that the geniuses of our human planet look like infants, like fetuses compared to the intelligence of the universe. And how egotistical is it of us to think that we are so smart as a species? But uh, when I realized that power and that intelligence is right here in this moment, and not only that, but has been here the whole time. The first 21 years that I was in like depression, suffering, chaos of my own dramas and egos, and I mean, not as a baby or kid, but in that unconscious state, life was a mess and it was confusing and it was difficult. And I wanted to believe in this God, not realizing you can't not be, you can't not be at all points in time surrounded by God. When you really get that, suddenly magic comes into your life. I mean, not like good, loving, powerful magic, miracles, synchronicities, just magical events, you know, start happening at all times because it's like that divine God being there's like a reward to recognizing its existence, to recognizing that it's there in front of you. There's reward to that. But then we go another level deeper, and it's not just in front of you. It's not just behind you and all around you, and in the stars and the galaxies and in the atoms and the bugs and the plants and the trees. It's even more so intimately connected to the space within yourself, in your mind, or beyond your mind, in behind your eyes, in your body, in your being, in your awareness. It's intimately connected to who you are. which is what I meant in the beginning when I said, where let's try to practice being comfortable being ourselves. Again, it's like when you really know who you are, any idea of discomfort is pretty silly and trivial because as far as like the expansive I that is deeply who we really all are, the I am, there's nothing to fear in that. Space for judgment in that. But to get there, to really get into that permanent state of the I am, of the tremendous bliss and freedom and healing and power, we have to be real about where we are. You can't fake your way into the I am. So you have to be, because the truth will set you free. Truth is both absolute, as in like God, the divine life, universe is always here. But there's also relative truth, and that is where we are. We have to work, we have to honor where we are. And if we pretend like we're not, if we pretend like we're already the I am at all times, yet we're suffering and we're losing our peace and we're afraid to be ourselves and on and on and on, then it's like that delusion blocks us from going any further, making any more progress to what we really want to be at. So, and that's where the truth will set you free, because when you really look at the truth of it and you're just real and honest and open about it, that obstacle that's in the way dissolves, and now you have a nice clear path straight upward into progress. Because you can't make progress if you're not willing to be honest and truth to where the progress needs to happen. And that can, you can follow, a lot of times the main obstacle of this is trying to maintain some type of image, some type of self-image, either with the outside world and everybody else that perceives us, or even more so with ourselves. So we just have to pay attention to this, catch it if it's there, not judge it, but be real about it. Also, I haven't mentioned this yet in the course, but I highly recommend taking notes. When you're watching these videos and going through this experience, I definitely recommend having like a spiritual journal of sorts. And then like when you hear something that really rings, you're like, ooh, I need to remember this week. Write it down, and then visit it through the week. Because like, yeah, you might hear that, oh yeah, I need to be making sure that I'm not falling into this trap of playing different roles around different people, acting in different personalities around different groups of individuals, whether it's when I'm around my family, or I'm around my spiritual friends, or I'm in the DMV, or wherever. And you can have these great sudden like, oh, I need to do this. But then when we don't write it down, it's like we're more likely to forget about it, and then it just kind of dissolves. And so much of my intention with this course is to really integrate our aha moments, our ooh, that's, those feelings of like, ooh, that's good. I don't just want to recognize, ooh, that's good. I want to live it. I want it to be lived. I want it to be, because that's where the real gift of it is. I mean, yeah, it's fun and it's beautiful to have realizations, but the real gift is when you really absorb that into who you are at all times. Because then you really get the freedom. So yes, it's 11:03. So this is the hour of the live talk. Thank you everyone for joining. I'm gonna take a little break, and then I'll be back in 10-15 minutes for a live Q&A. If you have any questions, you can ask them in this thread. You can go to the questions post within the group and ask your questions there. I also have some selected questions to go from if nobody asks any questions. But yes, next is Q&A. Much love and thank you, everyone.